Hello there, and welcome to Creative Adult Learning, a Lions University course brought to you by the USA Canada Lions Leadership Forum. My name is Past District Governor Wendy Kane, and I will be your host today. As a reminder, this webinar is being recorded, and it will also be available if you would like to review the material at a later time on the video with our Lions University website. If you'd like to participate in today's webinar, please put your ideas, comments, or questions in the chat window, and I will relay them to our faculty member. We may also unmute you, and you have the opportunity to share verbally. The Creative Adult Learning is course number 303, an elective course for the Lions University doctorate program that is designed to help Lions gain the skills to be a training facilitator for adult volunteers. The doctorate program involves the completion of one required course, shown at the top, and at least 9 electives from the 17 that are reflected in the list below. You will need to register an account on lionsuniversity.org in order to access the available courses, take quizzes, and track your real-time progress in completing those courses. This requires a different username and password than those of you who have a Lions International account or a USA Canada Lions Leadership Forum account. However, you could choose to use the same username and password if you wish, but they do not automatically talk to one another. After participating in this webinar or watching the video of the course, you can select the Mark as Completed button at the bottom of the course page, and the link to the next quiz module will appear. You might need to refresh your browser or select the next unit button to get to that quiz. Also, from the Lions University website, you can see a current status of all of the courses that are currently available or scheduled by going to the appropriate program summary page. And you can also monitor your own course completions by selecting My Account from the menu and then selecting the subpage that shows the bachelor's program, master's program, or doctorate program. When you have completed a phase of the program, such as all of the required courses or the minimum number of electives or the required experience, please be sure to select Apply for Program Credit and then select the appropriate phase. There will be questions there for you to complete relevant information, which will be verified by the Lions University leadership team and then confirmed on your profile. It is my pleasure today to introduce you to our faculty for today's topic. It is past Council Chair Dina Shurtleff from Multiple District 39, Idaho, and I am going to ask her to take it away. Welcome, Dina.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. Today, we're going to talk about adult learning. This is truly an interesting subject, and I learned so much in getting ready to teach this class. Today, our session objectives are to define adult learning, learn the styles of adult learners, define ways to incorporate adult learning in your presentations, learn the characteristics of different adult learning styles, and discover activities to enhance your training and presenting. When you think about adult learning, are there any major differences in the way a child learns and an adult learns? It's kind of interesting. There really are several ways. Children often require our help when we're teaching them. They require us to lead them in certain directions. Children have a very narrow viewpoint of their life. It's been pretty short. And adults bring a lot of experiences, depending upon their age, to the learning situation. Also, When you're teaching children, you can cast a broad net, but with children or with adults, they want something that they can apply it to immediately. And kids might do what you ask. However, adults require more motivation. And depending upon the type of learner that they are, will depend upon the type of motivation that will help them learn best. Many times we don't think about the cognitive impact of adult learners. Sometimes as we teach, we see adult learners unable to process and apply what we're teaching them. Sometimes we think it's a lot of fun when we're figuring out what we're going to teach, but then when we get to the point of teaching the class, it's not as fun for some different kinds of learners. Adding different learning styles is a big lift when you consider all the different styles that we're going to learn about today. It adds so much more to the teaching experience and also to the learning experience of your students. And how much will your students learn? Well, that depends on how much they can absorb at the time. And each level of learner learns at different rates. And sometimes, you're only going to listen to as much as your behind can take in the chair. So remember that all learners handle all adult learners handle information differently. And we need to be cognizant of what they're learning. Sometimes in your classes, it's just time for an activity or some place to take a break. Just be aware of the students that you're teaching. There are 7 styles of adult learning: visual, spatial, auditory, linguistic, logical or mathematical learners, intrapersonal, interpersonal, and kinesthetic. Each of these are separate and distinct. And as you learn about them, think about the way you learn. We don't always learn in the same ways in the same classes. Sometimes we can be more than one of these adult learning styles, and our students definitely can be more than one of these adult learning styles. So let's look at our visual spatial characteristics of adult learners. First of all, they lean heavily on images to process information. If you have a lot of pictures and not very many words, you're going to be more apt to get that visual spatial learner to interact in your class. They vividly picture patterns throughout all of your learning information, and especially when they're seeing the big picture. They learn best with images and graphics, and they don't use as many words. They want to show you. They want you to see what they're seeing. With visual learners, they see the forest and they see the trees. So sometimes they come up with ideas that a lot of other learners wouldn't come up with. So they have a little bit of a depth perception into learning and solving puzzles. They are also excellent at Tetris and billiards. So using a Tetris type of situation would be fun in an adult learning class. They give excellent directions and they see the world in 3 dimensions. Sometimes other learners can only see it in 1 dimension or in 2 dimensions, but visual spatial learners see in 3D. Some of the training things that you can do for a visual spatial learner is to use graphics. They want to see what your idea is and to visualize it in their brain. So, infographics, drawn guides, things that go from point to point, but they're drawn out. PowerPoints, which we're using tonight, this is a great thing for a visual spatial learner. Flip charts, we've all learned how to use those. Videos, and they're data driven. They want to know the percentages or the likelihood of what you're teaching them. They want to know what the data is on what you're teaching. Second is the auditory characteristics. Audio learners are very interesting because they have only learning by listening. Most of the classes that we teach are presented for auditory learners. They only make up about 30% of learners, but most classes are set up to be auditory. However, if you're an auditory learner, you retain about 75% of what you hear, which is astounding. They're great storytellers. We all know those people who can just get you with their stories. They crave attention and they create attention, and they take you on a journey. They're excellent speakers, but they're also good listeners. So if you're having an issue, they will take the time to listen to what you have to say. They use mnemonics to learn as well. Mnemonics is kind of interesting in using both a picture and an idea. And they are distracted by both a lot of noise, but they don't like silence because that's very distracting to them as well. So you can use mnemonics to help these learners, the auditory learners, learn what you're trying to teach them. Using podcasts and oral exams, asking questions out loud and waiting for answers, that's really good for an auditory learner. Using mnemonics, lectures, we definitely get a lot of those when we're going to college, when we're going to school. They use listening cues as to how they think what's going to happen next. Let's talk about the linguistic learner. A lot of schools use this as well as auditory to teach our students. But as adults, linguistic characteristics are a little more interesting. Most of them take notes. So if you have that one student or maybe a group of students in your class who's listening to everything you're saying, but they're just focused on taking notes. They're hearing you, but they have to take what they're hearing and put it down on paper. They are voracious readers. I have friends that are linguistic learners. And my son is one of them, and he probably reads 8 to 10 books a week. So people like that, they learn by reading. They love and remember written materials. They pick up on other languages quickly, which is interesting because for me, English is my first and only language. And I find other languages really hard to understand other than maybe a few words. So I have another son who barely passed English, but when he went to Korea in the army, he picked up Korean, Japanese, Chinese, Farsi. He was able to pick them all up really fast. And I thought that was interesting. But he was also a voracious reader. Book clubs are epic for this type of learner. They love to read the book and then unpack the book with the questions and with other people. Some of the training sessions that you could do with linguistic learners is to have small group discussions. And that's kind of an activity that you can do when you're teaching the class. You can break up into smaller groups. Discussion boards, we have those within Lyons University to discuss the type of classes and the things that we've learned in the classes as well. Guided readings, helping them find going from place to place to get the information that they need. It really interested me. If you're showing a movie or a video, turn on closed captioning. The linguistic learner will love you. I had never thought of that as being part of learning other than for somebody who maybe was deaf. But linguistic learners love closed captioning. And then writing exercises, teaching them or having them write things down, making lists, that all helps a linguistic learner move forward in their training. Now, you don't have to use just one of these in your training. You can use many of them and involve a lot of different student learners. Are there any questions so far? We good?
Not yet.
Okay.
Thank you.
So the fourth one is logical and mathematical characteristics. This is kind of a fun one. They like to break things down step by step. They're linear thinkers. They prefer the visual over words. So making a graph is something that's really good for them. They seek rules and order. So rules, steps, what's going to happen, and how it's going to happen, and what's the outcome. That's what a logical mathematical learner loves. They do not always see the big picture. However, they see all of the details in everything that you do. They see the bits and the pieces that a lot of us don't see, and they bring about information that we would often overlook. So some of the ways that you can help them in training is to show real life applications. And I'm going to use me as an example here. When I went to high school, I took geometry and I didn't like the teacher. And because she was mean, I didn't want to do the work. And she never could tell us what geometry was good for. So I hated the class. I still got a B, but it wasn't that great because I normally got A's. But when I got past raising children, I started quilting. And I use geometry so much in my craft. It makes me crazy. And do I wish I had listened and paid more attention in geometry class? Absolutely. But if my teacher had showed me how to use geometry in a real life situation, it would have been so much easier for me in that class. So maybe I'm not a logical mathematical person, but having those real life applications would have made all the difference for me, at least in that classroom. And make a structure. Let these people, let these learners know what the rules are, what the goals are, what the procedures are, and the outcome. And we do that a lot when we have a fundraiser. We set up what we're going to do. We look for our goals, our procedures, our outcomes. And a logical mathematical person is going to help you with that because they're going to pick that apart and get to all the little details that we need to work on while we're doing that project. Use common themes, patterns, and timelines, and use bullet points, logical steps, that really kind of hit me. And flow charts. A lot of us have flow charts that help us run our clubs, our districts. So using those things would really help a logical person. And using strategy games, things like chess or battleship, those kinds of games really help logical, mathematical people learn. And you can use those as an activity, do something like that in your training class, please excuse me. The one that really caught my attention when I was learning these teaching ideas was the intrapersonal characteristics. So this is a person that requires solitude. You can teach them with linguistics and auditory and visual, but they require time and energy to process all of that information. So they're the person that would like to step aside and think about it and come back to you. We're not always going to get the answer right away. Like I said, they need time and space to think about it. They are excellent at generating new ideas that would not necessarily come from someone else because they internalize everything that you've taught them. So they come up with some really amazing connections. They make connections that are not obvious or on the surface. They see things below the surface, deep down in learning that other people won't see. They make those connections by thinking about it and pulling all of the information together, but it takes them time. So when teaching those people, you need to let them journal because that's important, but you also need to use evaluations and step back. Have time where they can work alone or in small groups. In small groups, the intrapersonal person will work well if there's like 4 or 5 people. More than that, they will shut down. They don't want to have any part of that. Give them time for reflection in your training, whether it's a couple of minutes or a break or just some time to think, not always having words and visuals going. And use an activity that makes the learning step, makes the learning to stop, step back, and take a pause. And that will help them internalize what you're trying to teach them. And allow for longer response times in your training. Intrapersonal learners are only about 5% of adult learning style, but they come up with some of the best ideas that are brought forward when you're teaching your class. Right, we're going to go on to number 6, which is interpersonal characteristics. Now, this person is the exact opposite of the intrapersonal learner. They love social interaction. They can't wait to get in a group. They love social cues. They love conversation, discussion. They like going from group to group. A lot of times we'll see interpersonal people become leaders. They're fun to be around. They usually are almost always an extrovert. They get everybody involved. They're joyful. They lead with emotional intelligence. They feel out all the people in the room and then get them involved. This reminds me of past international president Brian Sheehan. The room is electric when he enters. He gets everybody involved. He makes you feel as if you're so important to the project that's going on. He sucks you in, he gets you energized, and that's the kind of person an interpersonal learner is. They're just excited and they're dynamic. They're fun. They just are fun. And they're excellent at reading social cues. So if someone's kind of sitting in the back and not very participatory, they'll go get them. They'll take care of them. And they thrive on the group experience. Something like the escape rooms, if you've ever done that, it's a group experience and trying to get out of a room. So they think that that's the best thing in the whole world, or throwing axes, or whatever takes a group of people. It just ignites them as learners. So here's a few things that you can do. Small group in-person interactions, they have to be in person, not on a Zoom or other types of learning. They want group discussions that start small and encompass more and more people. That helps them learn, and they glean from the other learners as well. And they want opportunities that are formal to interact with those around them, and then informal ways to interact with information, so that if it's not formal, they can kick back and they can just talk with those around them. And the more that they do that, the more that they learn. They are natural leaders. They want to lead the group, but they also want the group to be positive, and they want the interaction to be fun, and they want the people around them to feel a part. So they want to lead, but they want to do it with everyone, like being a part and buying into their information. A lot of us have, especially I find in Lions trainings, a lot of us are interpersonal. That's why we're in Lions. We want to be part of the big group. We want to learn. So I find that that's one part of Lions that, as a group, we seem to be interpersonal learners. So I would like you to step back and think for just a minute. When you're thinking about teaching all of these different learners, how would you describe color without using colors in your description? And as you think about that, you think about all of the different types of learners. How would you teach one that's visual, or one that's linguistic, or one that's mathematical? And if you take this question and put it all into that context, then you start to see how you can develop your trainings around all of these different learners. And how would you describe color? Light, warmth, cold. There's so many ways. Prisms, things that just bring to your imagination what color is.
I have a couple of things. Dina, can
Go
you
ahead,
hear me?
please.
Dina,
Yes.
I have a couple of things to share. This is quite the challenge for folks. There was a suggestion or an idea to show items of various colors if you're trying to describe a color, like you have a red apple, as an example. So you can kind of get more of the spatial or the visual aspect with other items that are common colors. There's another response that talks about the different characteristics of like how bright it is, or what the hue or the color family is. those types of actual characteristics to get you to the different shades that are across your screen.
Yeah.
And let's see, and then there's the more technical answer that is referring to the reflection of different wavelengths of light. So
Right.
got a few different aspects for describing color.
I like those. And as you can tell, different people are going to describe it different ways. And that helps you understand when you're creating your trainings, how to incorporate those things into your trainings to help all different kinds of learners who you are teaching. All right, let's go on to our last one. Do we have any other questions, Wendy, before I hit the last one here?
A couple, but it might make sense just to wait and cover them after you go through all 7.
Okay. Our final learning style is kinesthetic. And this is the type of person who learns by doing. So, for instance, if I was going to teach you how to quilt, they would want to be there with you from the very beginning through the process to the end, but they want to do it at the same time you're doing it. Verbal explanation is not enough. You can't just tell them. You can't just show them in a book, although might help, but they really want to have hands-on learning. They don't experience learning in most other ways. They need action to make all of that information stick in their brains. So a lot of us are that way when we're learning a new craft or we're learning a new recipe. We want to do it. We don't just want to watch someone do it. We want to be involved in every aspect of the learning process for certain things. Some of the things that you can do for training, kinesthetic learners are super creative. They come up with ideas that are way outside the box, and they will experiment for the sake of knowledge. So I had a sister that was like that. She would take apart everything in our house just to see how it would work. Putting it back together was a different story. Shouldn't do that so much. Most kinesthetic learners are very quick to react, even though their answer may be wrong. They don't take a lot of time to process. Again, they'll take apart anything and everything just to see how it works, just for the knowledge of doing it. And they like adventure books and movies. So the Temple of Doom, those kinds of things, Jurassic Park, really exciting things. They need the constant barrage of information coming to them. Virtual reality training is a really good tool for helping a kinesthetic person learn. Virtual reality training is pretty new, but a lot of people really like it. So you might think about that. A lot of times when we are learning and teaching lions, we have a lot of opportunities to bring a lot of information to light. As teachers and presenters, it's our job not only to think about what we're teaching, but to help the student learn what we're teaching. And by using these, say, 7 learning styles, we end up having more fulfilling classes for our students. So I would just ask you to use it and don't lose it. Incorporate what you've learned and observed when other adults are teaching, and then think about the presenters and facilitators that have kept your attention through a whole presentation. Those are the kinds of things that as presenters and facilitators we need to do as well. That way we can use these ideas to teach our students. And like I said, not all of us are just one type of student. We have different types of learning situations in different settings. So use all of that knowledge to your benefit as you teach others. All right, we did meet our session objectives today,
Before we
but
cover
before
that,
we go through those,
Dina, before we cover
yes.
that, I do have a couple of comments and questions.
Okay.
And actually, one of them you just hit upon as we went through there, and that was whether individuals have primarily one learning style or a combination, or if it's situational. Now, I think you can think of something like driving a car, and you just can't learn that without doing it. But
No, right.
other, so there are some things that may be situational does lend itself to one style versus another. But from your research and experience, have you found that people are primarily one, or they tend to blend or change?
They'll blend and change with the situation, but we all have one primary way of learning. I find, that some situations are harder to learn in than others, but most of us either are auditory learners or visual learners. And that's why in schools, that's how we're taught. That's about 65 to 70% of the learners across the board fit into those two main areas. But you can also have other characteristics in your learning as far as being intrapersonal or interpersonal or even mathematical. It takes, everyone is a little bit different. And then depending from the situation, like driving or cooking, you want to be doing it as well as learning it.
Okay, thank you. In thinking of the auditory learning style, there was just a note about mnemonics. So just as a refresher for folks that it's been a while since some of us might have been in school, but a mnemonic is any learning technique that helps aid in retaining or retrieving information. So yeah, there were several examples that you had on your slide with those, or it could be something like the phrase I before E except after C that we use to help us remember
Right.
spelling.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so with that, we did have a in the chat. Now I wanted to share this one because we hear this a lot with Lions, and that is acronym. Acronyms are a common mnemonic, but one of the acronyms for Lions is loving individuals offering needed service. So that was a nice touch just to fit in with the mnemonic
Yes.
aspect of learning.
Yeah. And as teachers, as we're teaching adults, it's so much different than probably most of us who have taught children for years and years, whether it's our own children or other children. But now we're into this different situation of teaching adults. And it's just totally a different set of different aspects of learning that really help us become better teachers.
There was a note on it, kind of crossed over between the intrapersonal and interpersonal learners. And if you have any, because one prefers the longer time to reflect and respond to things one-on-one, and then the other one is like ready to chat it up with their neighbors. So a lot of times we've done facilitating and things where you do have a couple of minutes of silent working time. Any thoughts or suggestions on how much is kind of the Goldilocks version of quiet time that's much and not too little,
I
or how
think
you've done that in
it's
the past?
about 1.5 to 2 minutes because then people start getting antsy without words or without something going on. But a lot of times the interpersonal can take 3 to 5 minutes to kind of process through. But if you wait that long, the intrapersonal people will be going crazy because nothing's
What,
happening.
yeah, what I've done on occasion is just ask them when they've finished to look up. And so then when like kind of a larger portion of the room is looking up towards the front of the room, that I kind of apologize and say, well, we need to move on now for the sake of time. You can
Right.
always come back and revisit too. So that's another a
That's a
tool
great idea
that gives
as well.
everybody a chance to look down and write, but then you can gauge, those who are really deep in thought, and you might also even get a little insight now into um,
Right.
their learning style from that as well. Um,
Yes.
and then the last item I had is more of an editorial for myself that I thought of was you were going through the kinesthetic learners and that emphasis on learning by doing. And it struck me that I find myself guilty of this. There are many things that we learn or know or think we know, and our head tells us that we know these things. But if there's a gap between what we know and what we do, then have we really learned it? and
Right.
and so maybe that aspect of learning by doing applies to a lot more varieties of things than maybe what I was thinking of in the past, because there's a lot of different instances where it's like my brain knows the right thing to do, but actually doing it and implementing or applying it is
Right.
a whole different story. And so then I have to stop and ask myself, okay, have I really learned this, or am I just saying that? So
And if you think of kinesthetic learners, I was watching this the other day of teaching a grandchild how to tie their shoe.
mhm.
And some kids pick that up in a heartbeat, and other kids just struggle with it and they don't get it very fast. And it's good to develop all the different kind of learning styles if you can, like work on those to learn that way because it broadens your horizon, I would say, or broadens your view of how people learn. So the more you work on trying to learn that way, then you get that perspective, I think.
Great. Thank you. Those were all the comments or notes we had in the chat.
Okay, great. I believe we've finished our session objectives today. We've defined adult learning, the learning styles of adult learners, the things that you can do to help adult learners in your presentations and facilitations. Um, we've learned a lot of the different learning styles, and there's more research out there. Please feel free to just, don't stop here with this, but discover the activities to enhance your trainings and your presentings and your facilitations. Do some more research. There are really neat games. There are really neat activities that you can use to encompass all of these different trainers in your presentation or the type of learners in your presentation. It's just an exciting time because for a long time, adult learning was just disregarded, where children's learning was so important. But adults learn too. And if we're cognizant of that, we're going to bring a lot of value to our presentations and our facilitations for all of our learners, whether they're Lions or something else. So thank you for being here. And Wendy.
Oh, thank you, Dina. That's some really great information. I'm going to go back through my notes and look forward to using that as a reference for other speaking and presenting opportunities that I have as well. So thank you for sharing your research and your knowledge and experience with us. For those of you that are online with us or watching the video, don't forget to log into lionsuniversity.org and take the course quiz in order to receive credit. Thank you so much, and we'll look forward to seeing you on future webinars. Take care.
Thank you.